Welcome to another episode of the English Coach podcast, where I attempt to add a splash of color and life to your learning experience by inviting you to live the language, where it's all about learning to dance with the language, where learning doesn't have to feel like work, and where I help you to help yourself not only to learn, but also to hold on to what it is you've learned. In today's episode 4, we look at the lived experience. I get to interview the lovely and talented Olga, an old friend of mine who took the time to share with us a little about her personal learning experience with the English language. Olga is a gifted young lady who steps out into the world as an aeronautic engineer and as a professional dancer. The decision to enrich her life experience with art and science and language is influenced and guided by the following things. Our topics for today: using an unconventional language to express what it is you want to express, approaching problem solving in an unconventional way, and achieving transformation of sorts by treading the road less traveled, building self-confidence and learning how to create something meaningful in spite of fears of what you might see as your own shortcomings, stage fright, coming to terms with fear and channeling the energy of it in such a way that it serves you, improvisation, the positive effects of claiming the freedom for yourself to dance with the language, the advantage of not taking yourself too seriously and of simply trying something out. And last but not least, the tangible effects of formal as compared with informal approaches to adult education.
Herzlich willkommen zum English Coach Podcast, präsentiert von trainingtree.de, die personalisierte Lösung im Bereich Erwachsenenbildung. Und jetzt dein Gastgeber, Ian Antonio Patterson.
Olga, so nice to have you here today. We're here in my little studio again in Berlin, and well, as I said, I'm very happy to have you. And today we'll be talking, I hope, about your experience with the English language, how you learned the language, and how you managed to develop it over the past few years. Very happy to have you here.
I'm also happy to be here.
Thank you. All right, so I would like to first introduce you to our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I can remember from the many conversations we've had, you are an aeronautic engineer. Am I correct?
You are correct.
All right, from the beginning I found that really cool because I don't have so many friends who are aeronautic engineers, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, now coming straight to the original question, how did you learn English?
I would say I started as everybody did at school, where you just have your normal English classes and you have to learn several lists of vocabulary, and that's it. I mean, it's almost everything you have to do, and they don't usually ask for more.
Okay.
And that's how I started to learn it, and I guess it's how everybody.
Yeah. All right, fine. That sounds good. I mean, if I understand you correctly, then you're saying that the learning experience that you had, the first formal learning experience, so to speak, was in school.
Exactly. So actually, I already started to learn it in Russia, but they had both languages, German and English, and English wasn't like a first. It was a second language, foreign language. And I learned just some very, very basic things, which still helped me later, of course. But then when I moved to Germany, I had to learn it at school, as everybody did. And that was my first learning experience with English.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I know you also studied. What about at university? Did you also have English courses there?
I didn't have any during my bachelor's, but now in master's, we really get more and more English courses and English literature, which we have to read, we have to understand and implement to our studies. And as an engineer, you have to be ready that there is a lot of English documentation, information, and etc. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, I can imagine that that learning experience you had in the university was more of what I like to call English for work, right? Or what people
Yeah.
call business English. Business
You're right.
English, yeah? Is that correct?
You are correct, exactly. It's more about technical vocabulary, which is also used at work.
All right, fantastic. So you did have some formal exposure to learning, or say learning in a formal context, and that was the first question. My next question to you was, what was your experience with developing the language? Not the formal settings, but what did you do to improve after you had formal lessons?
I didn't do a lot by myself, to be honest, which means I didn't watch like English movies or read some English books. But what I always tried to do and also did, then I liked several songs, for example. I was always interested in the meaning of it. So what I did, I just was searching for song texts and was listening to songs and reading at the same time. So I could hear how the words are pronounced and also learned by this, of course.
I find that very interesting because there are quite a few people who I also know who learn from songs. There is one friend of mine, a female friend of mine, she learned from, pop music. And another friend of mine actually learned from listening to Bob Marley's songs. So that's actually not too bad.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing is, as well, from learning the songs, or let's say learning from the songs, you get a feel of the rhythm of the language. The flow of it. You learn how
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's actually not too bad. I also learned a little bit from poetry.
Okay.
Yeah, and even though it wasn't really recommended at the time, for me it worked because the flow of the German language was not something that I knew, and I got that actually a lot from poetry.
Nice.
Good. All right. So, was there any other thing apart from songs and reading song texts? Were there any other things that you used to kind of like to help to develop your language, whether purposely recruited as a development strategy or anything else that just happened to help you to develop with the language?
This is the right point. Exactly. So what happened, I was put in several situations in my life where I had to speak and where I had to understand what was going on around me and to fit somehow into the surrounding. And for example, my last school year, I got the opportunity to work with American dancing company, Better Dance. And they came to Germany. It was 2009. And they had a project at our school, which is called Dancing to Connect. And we had 5 days of workshops where we had to actually understand what the teachers were wanting from us. So I didn't understand a lot at this time, almost nothing at all, to be honest. But you might know that dancing language is so you don't need to speak any language to understand dancing language, let's say, and it helped me at that time a lot. So even then, I wasn't able to understand everything they were asking and telling us. I could still do my tasks, let's say. And what happened when we got the opportunity to go to New York with them for 1 week, and there we worked also with American school together. Of course, I had other students who helped me to translate, to understand what the teachers were saying. But at that time, it was really like my first steps to speak, to try to speak English with people who are English speakers.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. All right, Olga, I find that particularly interesting because, as you know, I work with dance quite a lot. We've known each other for quite a few years. I've had some shoots with you as well, and I'm very much interested to know as much as I can about this whole show experience and the idea of taking the stage. And there is stage fright. For example, we have to, well, auf Deutsch we say damit klarkommen. We have to find a way to feel confident and express ourselves on the stage. Sometimes, the stage can be for a show, it can be the stage of life. I mean, it doesn't mean a show stage all the time, but also maybe at work you have to deliver a presentation. Whatever the case is, you're doing this in a foreign language, or in the case of dance, you're using the language of dance to express yourself. In both cases, you're kind of like on a stage. And how do you deal with that fear of either inadequacy or let's say not having the usual ability to communicate what it is you want to say? How do you deal with that fear sometimes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I also have this, no, I don't call it problem, but I'm still having this fear every time I'm going on stage or I'm having any kind of presentations. But I learned how to calm it, let's say, and how to trust in yourself. On the other hand, I just still have it, as I said, still. And what I think you also need it, because if I have, let's talk from my point of view, if I have this fear, I'm forced to deliver something good. So I need this something where I'm still, so you can't be really
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Go ahead. It's very interesting. Okay, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that this fear is always there, and instead of trying to get rid of it, you work with it?
Exactly. I try to take the best from it, let's say. So it keeps me motivated.
And focused. Good.
Exactly. And yeah, it just, I'm not that kind of person who can open and normally talk in front of big audience or, well, I'm used to dance on stage, of course, but as I said, this fear is still there. But I learned to dance with it and to keep it in myself, let's say.
All right. Well, as far as I understand, I don't want to cut you. It's all about not necessarily getting rid of this fear, but being aware of it and working with it. Sometimes you can also channel this fear in such a way that it actually helps you on the stage. And if you show this fear sometimes as well, it shows your audience that you take whatever it is you're doing seriously.
Exactly. So that's the point, yeah. And I'm also, so as you know, there are two types of people, introverts and extroverts.
You're an introvert?
Of course I am.
Okay.
And even if you're introvert, you have to learn how to deal with it, right?
Good.
Yeah, this is one of the points I have to deal with.
Yes. Today's episode 4 is sponsored by yours truly. This episode, together with the following 11 episodes, are still for the most part experimental. The goal is clear and likely to remain the same. The overall character of the show is expected, however, to unfold over time, depending, of course, on the feedback that I get from you. The English Coach podcast is presented by trainingtree.de, die personalisierte Lösung im Bereich Erwachsenenbildung. All right, well, tell me again, what is the name of that school that you said you worked with? What's the name of it?
It's Better Dance Company.
And where is it based?
It's based in America, New York.
All right, well, it was very interesting what you said, what you did there. You told me at one time that you guys worked on a project that was it was inviting you to use dance to communicate certain things. Could you just quickly say what that was about?
The project we're doing, it's called Dancing to Connect, and we're doing it like everywhere around the world. We went already to more than 70 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea behind is that professional dancers
Mm-hmm.
are coming to normal students, school students,
Mm-hmm.
and work with group of students.
Mhm.
So 10 years ago, when I took part in this project, in this program, our topic was 20 years of wall fall.
You mean the reunification?
Exactly, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
And then I think it was like 5 years ago when I saw that the director of this company was in Berlin again. And I asked him what he was doing here. He said that there are another program upcoming in Germany for next 3 or 4 years. And the current topic will be refugees. So they wanted to integrate refugees with this project, with this program. And the idea was to put refugees students and German students together and let them do this project and let them create something by themselves. And so, I mean, normally the students are from 13 to 20,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, and at this age you maybe don't trust in yourself, even if you have some ideas or even if you think that might be good, you still might not show or tell it
Mm-hmm.
because you're scared that it's just not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And this project, it forces kind of still to do it and to try it out and to trust in yourself. And at the end, so the dancers, professional dancers who work with students, they take these ideas and put them into a choreography, which is presented on stage. It helps a lot, to learn how to trust in yourself and still try to do something.
Okay. All right. I find that particularly interesting because that is an example of using another medium to achieve a certain purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what that means to me, or let's say it illustrates how sometimes you can approach a problem. It could be a problem having to do with communication. In this case, if I understand you correctly, it had to do with integration. And you used dance to bring cultures together.
Exactly.
All right, that's fantastic. And also, was there any indication of how these people felt when they started the project and how they felt afterwards?
What the company does at the beginning of the workshops, so there are like 5 days of workshops, and the first day they let them fill out questionnaires with questions like how do you see your future, how self-confident are you, and you have to answer these questions at the very beginning before the workshop started. And then I think these are the same questionnaires at the end of the program after the final show. Then the kids are very, very excited of what just happened and very proud of themselves. And and you can really good see this difference.
Good. I really appreciate it. That actually ties in perfectly with some approaches that I take myself with using art, using free time activities to achieve certain goals that might not seem obvious at the first glance. Now, thank you for that, Olga. This is really, really great stuff. But since we're on the topic of the stage, I like the idea, or I try to invite my students to give themselves permission to take the freedom and improvise with the language, as in to somehow find the confidence within themselves and not to be so concerned with perfection, but to just improvise with the language that they have. Some people call it, faking it till you make it. I just call it taking the freedom, taking the liberty to use what you have to get what you want. Now, the idea of improvisation, as a dancer yourself, right? You know what that is. As a learner and user of a second language, you also know what that is. What do you think? What is your experience with this freedom that we experience with improvisation? Does that help? Or what's your experience there?
Yeah, it helps a lot, of course. So if you are trying to be perfect all the time and put yourself in several frames, I don't think, for me, it wouldn't work at all. So I need this freedom, definitely. And at work or when I'm dancing, it's always, you have to try things out. So as you know, German is also not my mother language, so English is my third language. And sometimes I get really blackouts in every language, even in Russian.
Yeah, me too, also in English sometimes.
Yeah, and you just don't know why. And I mean, for me, I can't explain it. It just happens sometimes. But then you just need to still try to use it somehow differently, let's say. It helps a lot to overcome these boundaries, which are often set by your working environment or the audience, let's say. If you stay yourself and trying to do it your own way, for me, it always works best.
All right, good. All right, well, I don't know. I'm not going to go into how this improvisation works at work. Well, I'm sure you have to do it. You have to think on your feet sometimes at work. And maybe, sometimes you have to be a little bit more structured in the way you communicate in the work setting. But all in all, improvisation and giving yourself the freedom not to think so much about mistakes works just like it does on the dance stage. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, the very last question that I have for you is, generally speaking, this format that I'm working on right now, it promotes a different kind of learning. Now, I'm not saying that the formal learning, learning in a formal setting doesn't have its value. However, I want to believe that there are other ways, yes, from which we can benefit. I just want to ask you, because you've had many experiences with the language, you speak 3 languages, you are a professional, you use English in a professional setting, you work with art, you know how to work with stage fare, and so on and so forth. Now, from the experience you've had with learning English, what would you say has helped you to develop more? Was it the formal settings or the more informal settings? Use of the language, formal lessons or informal activities, free time activities that helped you to develop?
So I think I'm really, really good example of the second option you just said. So the formal learning at school didn't bring me much at all. So I was just learning with lists, and that was it. I mean, it didn't bring me any further at that point. What helped me a lot was really to speak to other people in English or in German also, of course, and to practice it. And then you are put in this environment, in this setting where you don't have any other opportunities. I mean, you have to speak, you have to understand, and you have to deal somehow with it. You're kind of forced to do it. And I mean, you start by little, And at the beginning, you maybe don't understand a lot, but with some help, with some translation tools, let's say applications, you always come a step further, and at the end you just realize, okay, now I actually do understand what the people are talking about, and I do understand what they want from me. And at one point we're just surprised, okay, why did this happen actually? And for me it was really, really good to be in these settings and to try to speak and
to live the language, I would say.
to live the language.
Fantastic. Olga, I think it's so great that you're here again. Yes, and I'm very excited. I want to thank you for being here, and thank you also for confirming what I want to promote. I want my learners to recognize that while yes, the formal training is very important, we don't want to say that that we get absolutely nothing from it. I mean, you do, vocabulary lists are, definitely a place where we should begin. However, it's using the language not only in formal situations, but in informal and unstructured situations that really helps to develop. I'm glad you agree with me.
Yeah, I really do. So practice and it's really everything when you need to learn how to speak.
Fantastic. All right. So, my dear, thank you very much for your time.
You're
and
welcome.
I'm looking forward to further projects with you in the future.
Me too.
Yeah. And what can I say? I think I'm just going to take this opportunity to say to my listeners out there, try to be like Olga a little bit. She's a successful lady who is an engineer and also someone who works with art. She is also a professional dancer. And these two activities, working with these two activities, as I said, in work settings or in dance or art settings on the stage, both of these have helped her. And I hope that we can learn from that.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Olga, thanks again for coming, and looking forward to our next interview.
Yeah, me too.
Now, for our German listeners, wer kann glaubhaft behaupten, dauerhaft in der Lage zu sein, Perfektion zu versprechen in einer sich verändernden Welt? Who can plausibly purport to permanently be in a position to promise perfection in a changing world? Now, truth be told, Olga didn't actively commit to any targeted action aimed specifically at developing her language. She did, however, speak about the things that worked. The fact that these things happen by chance doesn't change the fact, however, that they can also work for you. Now, on this day, October 24th, 2019, the Louvre Museum in Paris, home to Leonardo's Mona Lisa, opens its doors finally to display of more than 160 Renaissance-era paintings and drawings. I really hope my pronunciation of the word there was correct. I apologize if it was a bit off. I do believe the word Louvre in French means lioness in English or Löwin in German. Indicative, I suppose, of the power, beauty, and grace of the place. I have never been there, neither am I a connoisseur of art or art history. English is what I do, and I do dabble a bit in imagery through photo design, so I do know of the great man. Leonardo da Vinci was an engineer, designer, scientist and artist who was fascinated with the human form and the behaviors of animals and plants. Although he had no formal academic training, many historians and scholars regard Leonardo as the prime exemplar of the universal genius, or Renaissance man. an individual of unquenchable curiosity and feverishly inventive imagination, as described by Wikipedia. He is widely considered one of the most diversely talented individuals ever to have lived. Now, let's be clear about one thing. Let's say, this is not me challenging you to be Leonardo da Vinci or the next Leonardo da Vinci. I am just inviting you, to be a little more open. Nothing is wrong with mixing your interests. Nothing is wrong with being all of these things as Leonardo was, yes? A designer, scientist, an artist, and one of the most intelligent persons ever to have lived. Now, again, I'm not inviting you to be Leonardo da Vinci, but perhaps you could, try to be a little more like Olga. Apparently, she has a formula that works. And I'm very convinced about it, the things we spoke about. And I would really invite you to listen and listen again if you must, to see if there's something there that can also work for you. In the next episode, episode 5, we look at English for work. We dig a little deeper into presentations for work. The goal is the same, helping you to help yourself. So be sure to check it out. With a small win is always a good way to begin. Okay, then we've come to the end of this episode 4 of the English Coach podcast. Feel free to check it out. Check out the show notes for this episode. Like it if you like it, and if you don't, lie to me. But still, feel free to share it with a friend, post a rating, or better yet, write a comment. This will help it to help you as it is intended to do. Subscribe only if you feel like, so you know when there's a new episode available. Now again, this episode was essentially self-sponsored, but I'd still like to give a resounding shout out to everyone who's helped me, everyone who was somehow involved in the production. Olga, of course, very thankful to her for sharing, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode today. All right then, thanks for listening, looking forward to hearing from you, and bye for now.